gusty winds, temperature swings and severe thunderstorms across the eastern states. That's what we're re-looking at over the next week. And if you've been dealing with smoke, heat or just uncomfortable conditions lately, there's a few changes on the way worth knowing about. Let me break down what is happening across the country right now because the contrast is significant. Up in Queensland, particularly around central Queensland, you've been copping it. Heavy rain, thunderstorms, some areas recording remarkable totals overnight. Claremont has apparently broken rainfall records going back to 1916. That's over a century of records. When you hear numbers like that, it tells you this system is delivering. Meanwhile, down in Victoria, it has been dry. Frustratingly dry and windy. The smoke from the fires has been hanging around. Visibility has been poor and there's not much relief on the immediate horizon. We'll get into that. Tasmania sitting in cooler air, overnight minimums below zero in some areas, frost on the ground. That Antarctic influence is already making itself felt down south. And out in Western Australia, particularly the southwest, you've finally had a break from the heat, a cooler morning after what's been a brutal run. But as we know, that 1T lasts long, so let's get into the detail. The big picture right now shows lower air pressure sitting over most of the continent. That purple shading you see on the synoptic charts covering most of Australia represents that lower pressure. It is favourable for lighter winds in many areas and it is producing the instability that is driving those thunderstorms through the tropical regions. But down in the south, around Victoria, Tasmania and South Australia, there is a high pressure system dredging up a southerly flow. High pressure affects that southern coastline. And between that high to the south and all that low pressure over the continent, we re-getting what is called a squash zone. Now, if you've been watching weather maps for a while, you know what that means. When those isobars, those white pressure lines, get squeezed together, that is where you get your wind. The closer together they are, the stronger the wind. Simple as that. And that's exactly what we're re-seeing through the southeastern parts of the country. Gusty conditions, not severe gales for the most part, but enough to be a concern if you've got fire risk in your area. Dry, windy weather is not what anyone wants right now. Let us talk about Wednesday. The wind pattern through Wednesday shows that squash zone really tightening up around the ACT, the Victorian Alps, and through the Great Dividing Range. Gusts may get up to gale force in exposed locations. We're re-talking 65 to maybe 75 kilometres per hour in gusts. Now, that's not going to cause widespread damage, but if you're in fire-affected areas or you've got dry paddocks and bushland nearby, it's not a good combination. Keep an eye on the fire danger ratings for your district. Queensland continues to see thunderstorms and rain. The remnants of that tropical system are still pushing moisture inland. Some areas could pick up 60 to 70 millimetres in just a day. That is solid rainfall. New South Wales is mostly dry through Wednesday, just a couple of showers around. Same for the ACT. The energy is really concentrated up in Queensland. Northern Territory is pretty quiet. Usual stuff for the top end. A few thunderstorms, but nothing widespread. The monsoon hasn't really kicked into full gear yet. Western Australia sees thunderstorms through the Kimberley and inland areas. That area of low pressure in the south is producing some activity. A few morning storms on the southern coastline as well. Thursday is where things get interesting. The wind really picks up around Victoria and South Australia. Thursday afternoon in particular could see gusts approaching gale force. It's predominantly a southeasterly wind, blustery and persistent. If you are on the surf coast or around the Great Ocean Road, expect it to be unpleasant. Same for the Adelaide region. Not damaging in most areas, but uncomfortable and a concern for fire weather. The rain situation is still marginal for the south. There are some showers forecast, but we're re-talking light totals, a few millimetres at best for most of Victoria. The pale blue on the rainfall charts tells the story. It is not the kind of soaking the dams and paddocks need. Further north, it's a different picture. Parts of central Queensland could see up to 200 millimetres over the coming days. That is not widespread, but localised areas under persistent thunderstorms will cop that kind of total. The Calliope River has already hit moderate flood levels. Gladstone recorded nearly 80 millimetres overnight. The severe thunderstorm risk on Thursday afternoon is worth highlighting. The models are showing severe storms developing across eastern Victoria, through the ACT and into New South Wales. Large hail is possible, flash flooding in localised areas, and importantly, the chance of dry lightning. Now that's the concern. If you've been through fire seasons before, you know what dry lightning can do. The last thing Victoria needs right now is more ignition sources. Keep an eye on the Bureau of Meteorology warnings as we get closer to Thursday. Far North Queensland also has severe storm potential, though they tend to be a bit more isolated up there. Into Friday, there's a couple of low pressure systems developing up around the Coral Sea, roughly in the Vanuatu region. Both are worth monitoring, but at this stage, neither is a confirmed tropical cyclone. The modelling is a bit uncertain here. Yesterday, the models were showing these lows potentially merging into a single tropical cyclone just south of New Caledonia. Today, they were showing them splitting apart. That S, the nature of tropical development. We want to have a clear picture until we get closer. What we do know is that one of these lows is pushing more moisture into Queensland. Some areas could see 150 millimetres in a single day on Friday. That S is significant rainfall. The squash zone continues around the southeastern corner. That low pressure near the Queensland border means those isobars stay compressed. Gusty conditions persist around the mountains, the Victorian Alps, the Great Dividing Range and the ACT. Some parts of the southeast corner, maybe around the far eastern parts of Victoria and into southern New South Wales, could see 60 to 70 millimetres on Friday. That would be welcome. But for most areas further west, including the Riverina, it stays dry. Wagga Wagga and that region have been doing it tough. The paddocks are parched, the dams are low. You need rain and it's just not coming through on this system. South Australia sits in between everything. Southeasterly winds, maybe a couple of coastal showers, but nothing substantial. You might get an isolated thunderstorm out of that setup, but I wouldn't bank on it. The heat continues to push down through Western Australia. By Friday afternoon, it's warming up again around Bunbury and Esperance. That brief cool spell is well and truly over. Saturday into Sunday, the focus stays on the southeastern corner of Australia. That easterly wind coming off the Tasman Sea is the dominant feature. Not overly hot on the coastline because of that ocean influence, but inland areas may still be quite warm. What happens is those gusty winds pushing over the Great Dividing Range can lift temperatures on the western slopes. So even though the coast stays relatively comfortable, places further inland could still see the mercury climb. There is some hope for a few showers and thunderstorms across Victoria on Saturday. Not a huge amount, but fingers crossed some of that moisture makes it over the ranges. Any rain at this point would be welcome. High pressure sitting just south of Tasmania is driving that southeasterly. Gusts could still approach gale force in exposed areas. Bass Strait will be choppy. The tropical picture remains uncertain. Those two lows in the Coral Sea are still developing. By Sunday, the modelling suggests they might be interacting, possibly merging, possibly staying separate. We'll have a clearer view in a few days. The smoke situation for Victoria is worth mentioning. With the wind direction shifting to that easterly flow, the smoke that has been drifting towards New Zealand is now pushing back over towards South Australia. If you in the Adelaide region or along the SA-Vic border, you might notice it over the coming days. Looking at the 7-day rainfall outlook. Queensland is clearly the winner here. All those thunderstorms really add up. Some areas across central and north Queensland could see totals exceeding 200 millimetres. The coastal areas of New South Wales might see up to 100 millimetres if they get a severe thunderstorm over them. But look at what happens just over the other side of the ranges from the ACT. Completely dry. Once you get into the Riverina and southern New South Wales, the totals drop right off. Same for Victoria. It's frustrating frustratingly dry for those areas, the pattern is clear. Eastern Australia, particularly from Brisbane up through to the tropical north, is seeing the bulk of the wet weather. The south and the west remain largely dry. Western Australia gets a few showers through the Kimberley and the top end. Nothing substantial though. The Pilbara and the Goldfields stay dry. Now let's talk about what to actually do with all this information. For those in Queensland dealing with heavy rain and flooding, the usual advice applies. If it's flooded, forget it. Never drive through floodwater. It doesn't matter if you've got a four-wheel drive or you think you know that crossing. Water moves fast and it only takes a small depth to push a vehicle off the road. Check the bomb flood warnings regularly. Rivers that are already at moderate flood levels can rise quickly with more rain on the way. For the fire-affected areas of Victoria and the ACT, these gusty wind days are a concern. Make sure you know your fire danger rating. If it's elevated, have your bushfire plan ready. Know your trigger to leave. Leaving early is always the safest option. If you're in a total fire ban area, that means no fires whatsoever. No burn-offs, no campfires, no angle grinders in the paddock. There's a reason these bans are in place. For those dealing with the temperature swings across the eastern states, you've probably noticed people have been crook for weeks now. 30 degrees one day, 18 the next, then back up again. Flu, headaches, sinus issues. That pattern should settle down a bit after we get through this week's changes. Check on your elderly neighbours and mates. Temperature fluctuations can be tough on people who don't regulate their body temperature as well as they used to. For the livestock owners in areas waiting for rain, I know it's frustrating watching the rainfall totals up north while your paddocks stay dry. Make sure your stock have access to water and shade. If the forecast continues to show minimal rain for your region over the coming weeks, start thinking about your contingency plans. Let me touch on the model situation briefly. We're seeing reasonable agreement between the access model from the Bureau of Meteorology and the European model on the broad patterns, the gusty conditions, the eastern rainfall, the ongoing dry spell in the south, that S consistent across the modelling, where their S divergence is in the tropical development up around the Coral Sea. That S normal for systems that haven't fully formed yet. The models struggle to resolve exactly where and how tropical lows will develop until they more mature. By Thursday, we should have a clearer picture of whether those systems will impact the Australian coast directly or track further east. Either way, Queensland is in the firing line for continued heavy rain. For those asking about the outlook beyond this week, I am cautious about getting too specific. The models have some consistency out to about day 7, but beyond that, it gets less reliable. What I can say is that the pattern we're seeing with moisture concentrated in the tropical north and drier conditions in the south is fairly typical for this time of year. The monsoon trough is active, the tropical systems are doing their thing, and the southern states are waiting for meaningful rain. The Indian Ocean dipole and La Nina influences are still playing out. That should favour above average rainfall for parts of eastern Australia over the coming months. But whether any particular week gets rain is a different question. Right, let me summarise what is coming. Today through Wednesday, gusty winds developing through the southeastern corner. Queensland thunderstorms continue. Most of the south stays dry. Thursday is the gusty peak for Victoria and South Australia. Severe thunderstorm risk in the afternoon across the eastern states. Watch for large hail, flash flooding and the possibility of dry lightning. Friday onwards, the moisture continues across Queensland. Tropical lows in the Coral Sea are being monitored for potential cyclone development. Gusty easterlies persist in the southeast, Saturday and Sunday. Possible showers for eastern Victoria. The smoke may shift towards South Australia with the wind change. 7-day rainfall, Queensland sees the bulk of it. Victoria and the Riverina remain largely dry. Fire weather remains a concern in the dry, gusty conditions across the south. If you're in those areas, stay alert and know your plan. That's the situation for the week ahead. Plenty going on, as always. Keep an eye on the Bureau of Meteorology for the latest warnings and updates, particularly around those severe thunderstorms and fire weather. If you're in a flood-affected area, stay safe and done to take risks with floodwater. If you're in the dry parts of the south waiting for rain, I hear you. It's been a frustrating run. Hopefully the pattern shifts in your favour soon. We'll be back on Thursday with the next update. By then, we should have a much clearer picture of what is happening with those tropical systems in the Coral Sea. Until then, take care of yourselves and look out for each other. One more thing before I go. A few of you have been asking about the fire situation and the smoke. The fires around the Victoria-New South Wales border region have been producing significant smoke over the last few days. If you are within 40 or 50 kilometres of the border on the South Australian side, you've probably been smelling it. The good news, if you can call it that, is that the wind direction shift over the coming days should move that smoke around. Whether that's good news or bad news depends on where you are. Those in the Adelaide region might notice it more over the weekend. If you've got respiratory issues or you're resensitive to smoke, keep an eye on the air quality reports. On high smoke days, try to limit outdoor activity, particularly strenuous exercise. Keep windows and doors closed where practical. For those directly affected by the fires, our thoughts are with you. These situations are incredibly stressful, and the combination of fire threat with gusty wind forecasts is not what anyone wants to hear. But being prepared and having a plan is the best thing you can do. The Country Fire Authority in Victoria and the Rural Fire Service in New South Wales have excellent resources on their websites. If you haven't reviewed your bushfire survival plan recently, now is a good time to do that. I also want to touch briefly on the Coral Sea development for those particularly interested in the tropics. These two low-pressure systems we're remonitoring are currently sitting around the Vanuatu region. For any system to be declared a tropical cyclone by the Bureau of Meteorology, it needs to meet certain criteria. Organised convection, closed circulation, sustained winds near the centre, reaching at least 63 kilometres per hour or 34 knots. Neither of these systems has met that threshold yet. They reach tropical lows with the potential to develop further. The track forecasts at this range are highly uncertain. Some model runs show one or both systems curving towards the Queensland coast over the next week or so. Other runs show them tracking further east and not directly impacting Australia at all. What we can say with more confidence is that regardless of whether they become named cyclones, the moisture associated with these systems is already affecting Queensland. That monsoon flow is active. The heavy rainfall is real, whether or not there's a named cyclone attached to it. For those in far north Queensland and along the tropical coast, this is the time of year to have your cyclone preparedness sorted. Make sure loose items around the property are secured or can be quickly brought inside. Know where your nearest cyclone shelter is if you're in a vulnerable dwelling. Stock up on essentials so you're not making last-minute runs to the shops if a system does threaten. The Bureau of Meteorology Cyclone Tracking page is the best resource for the latest on any developing systems. I encourage you to check that regularly if you're in the tropical areas. Now, comparing this week's pattern to historical events. The gusty conditions we are seeing across Victoria and the ACT, combined with dry fuel loads and ongoing fire activity, have drawn some comparisons to the lead up to Black Saturday in 2009. I want to be clear here. We are not looking at Black Saturday conditions. The temperatures are not as extreme and the wind forecasts, while gusty, are not at that catastrophic level. But the comparison does highlight why these dry, windy days need to be taken seriously. February 2009 showed us how quickly things can go wrong when you have fuel loads, wind and ignition sources coming together. The difference this time is the temperatures. We're not looking at those 46-degree days that Victoria experienced in the lead up to Black Saturday. The gusty conditions are a concern, but the overall fire weather setup is not in that catastrophic range. That said, complacency is never the right approach. If you are in a fire-prone area, stay alert, know your plan. And don't assume that just because conditions aren't at their worst, you don't need to be prepared. The heavy rainfall in Queensland also warrants some historical context. Claremont breaking records that have stood since 1916 is significant. For context, that over 100 years of rainfall data, central Queensland has seen some significant flood events over the years. The 2011 floods that devastated Brisbane and Toowoomba remain fresh in many people's memories. The inland flood events can be just as destructive, even if they don't get the same media attention. This current system is producing those kinds of localised totals in some areas. Not everywhere, but some places are copping serious rainfall. If you're in a flood-prone area, take the warning seriously. River levels can rise quickly, particularly in the smaller catchments where the rainfall is concentrated. Right, that's enough from me. To recap the key points. Gusty winds through the southeastern states, peaking Thursday. Severe thunderstorm risk Thursday afternoon across eastern Victoria, the ACT and New South Wales. Heavy rain continues across Queensland with flooding in some areas. 2 tropical lows being monitored in the Coral Sea. Fire weather concerns in the dry, gusty conditions across the south. And the Riverina and Western Victoria remain frustratingly dry. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you again on Thursday with the latest